to get out the paper about St. Patrick that I asked to write. And here's what we'll do. Just pass it. So, Oren, just pass your paper. You know, everybody pass the papers along until they get to Clara. And Hans, you just pass your papers to Zachary, and then I will collect them here. Did you have any trouble with the paper? Was it pretty easy to do? Yes. Oh, no, your mom sent me an email already, so I know about that. No, Micah, no worries. Okay, I'm just going to wait till all the rest of them come because they're all sending them down. You know what? It's you don't have to apologize. Although we're always trying to be neater and better, aren't we? But yes, there we go. Okay, you don't need to stop and look at them. You just need to pass. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, usually I like to start with our history and our writing, but today we're just going to mix it up and we're going to do our writing first because it kind of relates to what we did last week. And then we're going to talk about the new stuff that you read, okay? So what I would like you to do is get your reading guide out, the notebook that's your reading guide. And I would like you to turn to page, wait for it, 6. We are going to do another paper just like the one we just did. And, okay, just a second. Okay, I see that several people did this. Okay, so do you remember last week? We're going to do this again, so I'm going to leave this on the board. We had an outline, and it had a 1, and it had a 2, and then numbers, and a 3, and numbers. Those are paragraphs. The paper you wrote should have had 3 paragraphs. So, some of them did, and some of them only had 1. Some of them, you put everything that we outlined into 1 paragraph. You didn't indent again and start a new paragraph with a new idea. Do you understand what I mean by that? So I'm not even going to out, like I don't even know some of these. Oh, that's the other thing. Some people don't have a name on their paper. So I'm not going to pass them back out, but I will remind you next week, okay? So let's find, oh, now I can't. Okay, so this one, do you see how it's just all, I'm covering up any identifying, it's just all 1. There's no paragraphs. So if that's something you did, remember we're thinking of 3 paragraphs. If you did that, then I'm not talking to you. You already know that. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So on page 6, we have a story, and we're going to do an outline. We're going to do it together again. Because for some of you, like this is really easy, and you've done this before. For some people, like I've never done this before. I don't know how to find what goes on the outline. We'll do it together. But last week, we talked about the church in Ireland and England. Do you remember that? We talked about, well, you wrote about St. Patrick. We talked about the amazing job they did of copying down books in Ireland and England. Well, the story on page 6 is about another famous Irish man. His name is Columba. I love Columba because Columba loved books. He super loved books. In fact, he loved them so much, it got him in trouble. And that's what this story is about. I'm going to read the story. You can follow along if you want to on page 6. Saint Columba and the book. Columba was known for constant study and prayer. Really, really constant. He is said to have written 300 books, by hand, of course, continuing to transcribe up to the night before he died. Finian and Columba got into a disagreement over a psalter. Do you guys know what a psalter is? It is not. Hi. A psalter is a book that just has the Psalms in it. Christians of the past have often used the Psalms to pray. have prayed through the Psalms. And so sometimes you would have a book that was just the Gospels, right? Or it was just the Psalms. Why? Because the Bible is really big. You know, it takes a long time to copy the whole thing out. And when you do, it's very large. You all have Bibles. Is your Bible fairly large? I mean, they do make them small, but if they make them small, they're so small, you know, I have to have a magnifying glass and my reading glasses now. I can't see it anymore. If it's got decent size type, it's a big book. So they would have volumes. They would have a Psalter. They would have the Gospels. This particular time, they got into a fight over Finian's copy of a Psalter. All right. I'm going to skip past the parentheses there. Columba borrowed the manuscript from Finian, possibly without permission, and secretly copied it with the intention of keeping it for his own use. But Finian said no. This was theft, illegal copying. He demanded that Columba hand over the copy he had made. Did you understand what he did? He snuck into Finian's private library, grabbed his manuscript of the Psalms, secretly copied it, not on a Xerox machine, you know. Or I've just dated myself horribly. Xerox machine, do they even use those anymore? He copied it out by hand, and he didn't ask. And Finian found out, and he said, "You can't have that book. I don't care if you copied it out by hand. It's my book." Finian took the matter to King Diarmait Mac Cairpal. I have no idea if I've said that right or not, because Irish names are very hard to pronounce. The High King of Ireland, for arbitration, for judgment. Believing he had done nothing wrong in his attempt to spread the word of the church, Columba agreed. It didn't hurt his expectations that Diarmait was a relative. Finian's argument was simple. My book. You can't copy it. He felt that if anyone was going to copy a book, it should be done through certain procedures and certainly not in secret under his own roof. Columba's response was not all that different from those in favor of less restriction in digital duplication, copying things digitally on computers, that the book had not suffered by his copying. It is not right, he said, that the divine words in that book should perish, or that I or any other should be hindered from writing them or reading them or spreading them among the tribes. In his closing address, he told the court that those who owned the knowledge through books were obligated to spread the knowledge by copying and sharing them. He felt that to not share knowledge was a far greater offense than to copy a book that had lost nothing by being copied. But the king ruled in Finian's favor, famously saying, "To every cow belongs its calf, to every book its copy." In other words, every copy of a book belonged to the owner of the original book. Of course, the story didn't end there. After more arguing and Columba's next offense, which was harboring a fugitive, the result was a battle and the death of 3,000 people and Columba's exile. Some people say this is the first copyright trial in history. Someone went to court to say, you've illegally copied my production, my book. Columba said, everybody should have a copy of the Psalms. Why is that wrong? But the king said, no. The owner of the book gets to tell you whether or not you can have a copy. And, you know, this still happens today. We can't just copy things, right? We can't just go copy a bunches of pages out of a book and stick it in our own book and sell it or use it as if it's ours. We have to say who the book originally belonged to. Poor Columba, even though this book got him into trouble, it was okay until, like it says at the end of our story, he got into a big argument, battle, a lot of people died, and the king sent him into exile. And here's what Columba did. He loved Ireland so much. He didn't want to go far away, but he knew that if he went far enough away that he could still see it, he would always be sad because he would go to the shore and he would wish he could go home. So he got some friends who said they would go with him into exile. They got on a boat and they headed north off the north coast of Ireland. And he said, I want to find an island just far enough that I can't see Ireland anymore, but that I know it's just over the horizon. I don't want to go too far, but it will break my heart if I see it every day. So they did. They went to Iona and founded a monastery there. And Columbus Monastery in Iona gave birth to dozens of other monasteries in Scotland and England. He was in the forefront of what we talked about last week, how Ireland and England were spreading knowledge, spreading the gospel. So I guess it turns out good for history that Columba got exiled, but it turns out sad for him. That is the story of St. Columba. We're going to tell it back. Here's what I'd like you to do. Turn your book back a page to page 4. And page 4 should be empty. Is it empty? Oh, awesome. All right. I would like you to copy down the outline. I didn't print you another one. We're going to make our own outline here, but it's going to look just like the one we did last week. So just like this. You know, I'm going to run out of room. You know what? You may use whatever you want. A lot of people recommend using a pen, even though you can't erase. Do you know sometimes when you write with a pencil, do you ever notice your hand starts pressing harder and harder and harder? Does your hand ever get tired when you're using a pencil? It doesn't stay sharp. Do you know what I mean? And then you have to press harder and harder. When I use a pencil, I find out that my hand starts to hurt. But ink from a pen just keeps flowing and you don't have to press very hard. So if your hand ever gets tired from writing, use a pen. Even though, you know what, if you make a mistake, just cross it out and write next to it. It won't be the end of the world. All right, I'm going to write my other paragraph over here because I was running out of room at the bottom. Okay, I'll give you a minute to copy that down. Just what's on the board, and then we're going to fill it in together. Jonathan, gotta look at the name tags. Okay, so last week, you might remember that in our first paragraph, we're just talking about who is in the story, where do they live, when does it happen, what are the basic facts about the setting, the who, where, and when. So somebody tell me, somebody that's in this story. St. Columba, okay. St. Columba is in this story. And what kind of man is St. Columba? What does he like to do? He likes books, doesn't he? In fact, I'm going to just use a symbol here. Loves books. I know, but I'm lazy today, Oren, and I just decided to. And where did Columba live? He lived in Ireland. Now, does it tell us anything in the story about where exactly he lived, other than Ireland? I really don't think it does. Now, this is a little dangerous because Columba is a historical person and this really happened. But I'm going to let us use our imaginations a little, like they do when they write historical fiction. Sometimes we use our imaginations. What kind of house, where would a person who loves books live? Would they live in the middle of a big city where there's lots of hustle and bustle? Yes. If you like to read? Oh, why do you think? So that you get more business. Oh, but does he want business? Okay, when you read, what do you like to have around you? What do you like the circumstances around you to be? Zachary? Mm-hmm. I like peace and quiet. Yeah, definitely a warm drink, Zachary. This is critical. How about if we say that maybe he lives in Ireland, he lives out in the country, surrounded by forests and fields, where it's quiet and he can do a lot of reading. I'm going to put that in. He lives around forests and fields. My one of my children went to Ireland in May and showed me all his pictures, and it turns out Ireland has some pretty tall mountains too, tall enough that the trees don't grow up there. Okay, who else is in this story? Finian. Finian, and Finian is, it doesn't tell us who Finian is, does it? Does it sound like Columba and Finian know each other fairly well? It sounds like, because Columba apparently was staying with him. What did somebody say over there?
It sounded like they were friends.
So at least before the trouble started, right? Finian was his friend. And it sounds like Finian also must be a book lover, would you say? If he owns, this is hard for us to remember. Look how many books are in this room. Look at the books on the shelf. I've got books. You've got tons of books in your packs. Imagine a time when it cost, you had to work for 6 months to afford a book. People didn't have very many, they were precious. So if Finian has a library, and you know what, a library of books might be 20 books. You might have 15 or 20 books. And that was a library. Yeah. Sometimes we see stats. This is more into the Middle Ages, but before the printing press, that it's, wow, this guy had 400 books. Ooh, I bet everybody in this room has 400 books in your house. And that was a big deal once upon a time. We forget how blessed we are that books are easy to find. But Finian has a library. He's his friend, and he also loves books. We can use the same. He feels so strongly about books that he's willing to take his friend to court over them. So we have the who. We don't have the when. What were you going to add, Zachary?
Well, I mean, technically, you could add King Dion.
We could. Here's the problem when we're telling a story. He's part of the characters, but he's also a big part of the what's the problem, if you know what I mean. We could put, though, that he's the king in Ireland. And you know what, Zachary? This answers the question I just asked. When did it happen? When he was king. Very good. So the king whose name I am not sure how to pronounce, I will have to look that up this week, was the ruler. What else do we want to add? Image, mood. We're going to leave it at there. If you think of something else that you would like to add to the setting, if you want to elaborate on it, you can do that. But we're going to move on to what happened. And tell me, what did happen? What's the thing that started the conflict between these two men? What happened? What? Yes, and we're gonna start in paragraph 2 now. That should be part of the problem. What is the first thing that happened? What did Columba do? Psalter, yeah. You can just say book, you can say Bible. So Columba, can we do it in 3 words? I want to say Columba took Finian's book, but that's 4 words. We could. Will we remember what the C means? Do you think? Will everybody, if we just put a letter C here, will everyone remember? You won't think it's, I don't know, Cheetos or some other word that starts with C? Oh, that's fancy. The two steps. First, he takes the book, right, and then isn't. I don't think we can call it plagiarism because it's copying someone else's words. They're not really Finian's words, are they? This is a complicated issue. Okay, we're going to go with that suggestion. C steals Finian's. I'm going to say Salter because that's what it says in the story. You can just say book. And what does he do with it? Copies. Does Finian know? At the time, while he's doing it, does Finian know? So he copies it how? Secretly. He copies the book secretly. The story doesn't tell us how Finian found out, does it? I don't think I've ever heard a version of how he found out. I feel like that would be a good place for you to use your imagination.
Well, I mean, they have plenty of books in the library. I would think they would
Maybe he went in and he noticed it was missing and he went hunting for it. Maybe Columba was packing up to go home and, he has a pack or a satchel, a bag, and there's this piece of parchment sticking out. There's this paper sticking out. And Finian says, "What's that? I didn't see that when you came. Oh, do you have a new book and you haven't told me about it? Because we both love books." He can find out however you want him to find out. Surprise me. But Finian does find out, doesn't he? Finian discovers the theft. What does Finian do? Takes him to court. What takes C court? Would that make sense to us if we looked at it later? Takes. I guess we don't need to say C because we have 3 words. Takes Columba or taken to court. Remember, there's not only one right answer here. There are words that are better than others. The is never a helpful word. The doesn't make you remember anything. But any of these combinations are fine. Takes Columba to court, and who's going to, well, let's not add that yet. Takes Columba. Why does Columba agree to go to court?
He thinks he's going to win.
He thinks he's going to win. I am so right. How could we say that in 3 words? Can you think of a way we could say that? Columba thinks win. He was wrong. Do I stand in your way, ladies? Can you see? Okay. So we have the setting and we have the problem. Now we need to see how the problem gets solved. I told you last week that a story with no problem is a really boring story, but a story where the problem doesn't get solved is a very depressing story, isn't it? We don't really want to come to the end and find out nothing got fixed. Are you thinking of examples of stories? Oh, yeah. Well, the book story gets solved, not in the way Columba wanted, but yes, if Columba had not caused further problems, he would still be living in Ireland. But like I said, it turned out good for the world because he founded a monastery that helped change the world. Okay, so they're at court. Who's the judge in the court?
The king, the high king.
The king. The king judges the case. What is Finian's argument? How does he say to the judge, I'm right and this is why?
It's my book.
It's my book. He stole something from me. You can't steal from people. It's mine. So Finian says, it's mine. This is his argument. His entire argument. No. If it belongs to me, it's mine and you can't take it. What does Columbus say? His is a little more complicated. We might have trouble squeezing this into 3 words, but basically, can someone sum up what Columbus says?
It should be shared.
It's knowledge. In this case, it's the Bible. You can't own that. Knowledge shouldn't be hoarded. If you know something, you're obligated to share it with other people. I'm just doing what is morally right. Now, I don't know how we're going to put that in 3 words.
Columbus says share it.
Okay. How about this? C says should be shared. Should be shared. And I think we'll know what it is that we're talking about. Did I say Columbus? I'm sorry. I did not mean Columbus. It makes it worse because there's another saint. His name is Columban. Columba and Columbine. It's very confusing. And what does the king say?
Something about a cat and a cow.
Something about a calf and a cow. But what does that mean? What does he mean by that comment?
Belongs to its cow.
Okay, so if I steal, because some farmers that raise livestock, they will breed the livestock, right? They will find, you have this prize-winning cow, and you find a prize-winning bull to be the dad of the baby. People do this, dogs and things like that. So he's saying, you can't just steal somebody's cow and then take the calf. It's like, well, that cat, the dad of the calf is my bull. So he said, no, the calf belongs to the mom. The copy belongs to the owner of the original book. So the king says, I feel like, this is a very famous comment, to every cow its calf, to every book its copy, this judgment. I feel like I would like to use those words because they're really great. Okay, we're going to use 4 words because I'm going to break the rules if I want to. Every cow gets its calf. Every book. Oh, that's very good. You guys are more creative than me. I'm a wordy person. So I just like to use words instead of symbols. Okay. I'm kind of a non-symbol sort of person. The king says every cow, calf, every book its copy. You know what we're going to do? We're going to end our story on a happy note and not put in the ugliness about battle and 3,000 people dead and being exiled, because this just will make us sad when we write the story. So this week, what I want you to do is turn this back into a 3-paragraph story. But this week, there's a twist, just a little addition. Some of you, I think one of you last week said, are we going to do the checklists or are we going to add things in? Yes, Oren. So no, but I am going to start having you add in some things that make writing more interesting or exciting. And Owen, I think I'm not repeating any from last year. I tried to get all new ones, that we didn't do last year, but I can't promise you that I didn't repeat. The thing that we're going to add, I would like you to write this down. You can just write it on the side, wherever you've written your outline, if you have room at the top or at the side. It is called parallelism. And here's what parallelism is. We're going to do 2 kinds. The first kind we're going to do today is using 3 words of the same part of speech.
Each paragraph?
No, just once in your whole paper. That's a good, and using them close together. Here's an example. The dog growled, snarled, and barked. Yes, yes, they don't have to have the same sound or anything. What have I used 3 of here? Verbs. I've used 3, and they are ed. I've used 3 verbs. How about this? The dog was ugly, ferocious, and rabid. Okay, I like it. You should definitely stay away from this dog, by the way. What have I used 3 of? I've used 3 adjectives. The dog barked loudly, I like constantly should be my last one. Loudly, annoyingly, and constantly. We all know this dog. We've been near this dog, I'm sure. What have I used 3 of? I've used 3 adverbs. Do you see what I've done? The reason I say 3 is that 2 makes it just seem a little just like an accident, and it doesn't really pop. And when you get up to 4 or 5, it starts to sound like you've gotten carried away, and maybe you just got a new thesaurus for your birthday, and you're just reading it all the time. It sounds a little odd. 3 is a magic number. Things that come in 3s are just aesthetically pleasing to us. So that's why I picked 3. 2 would work. 2 is okay, but then again, it doesn't really stand out as much. If I just say the dog barked loudly and annoyingly, it doesn't have the same pop as when you do 3 of them, I feel like. Oren.
So if I were to say the dog barked at the cat and meowed at the rat or something, would that be?
Yes, if you want to elaborate on it, we are going to do a second kind of parallelism that's phrases and clauses. We're going to do 2 kinds. This is the one that's just with words. So you would kind of be jumping the gun a little bit, Oren, but I would take it. I would like you to do this somewhere. Are you guys listening? I would like you to do it at least one place in your paper. You don't have to do it in every paragraph, although go for it if you want to. And here's what I would like you to do. In your paper, so grab a paper, all right? Wherever you do the parallelism, say it's right here. This is your paper and it's right here. I would like you to put a letter P out in the margin, and then it shows me, Mrs. Ferguson, my parallelism is right here. Then I won't have to read everybody's papers and say, okay, I don't know if they forgot to do it or if I just couldn't find it. If you mark it, I will know you did it. Does that make sense to everyone? You don't have to type it. You can print it out if you print, and then just get a pencil and write a P in the margin on the line. Yes, Oren. I would really like it if you would just put it in the margin. People do it in the sentence, and then I have trouble finding it.
Or you could do it in another font.
Hey guys, just put it in the margin. All right? Because that's really easy. All you gotta do is grab your paper, grab a pencil. It takes you about 2 seconds to make a little P. All right? Do you have any questions at all? We're going to do just this one and maybe one more story, and then we're going to move on to doing another kind of writing. So if this is really easy for you, hold on, because we'll do something more complicated. Okay, so that's the first thing I want you to do this week. I want you to retell the story. You are allowed to embellish details because we don't know all the details, but make the details, don't have them, get in a Jeep and drive to the court. That's a detail that wouldn't be historically accurate. Later, I'll give you a chance to embellish a story as much as you want, I promise, but not this one. Okay? All right. So that's the first thing I'm going to have you do this week is write that and bring it back to me. And next week I will have your St. Patrick stories for you, and I will give you advice and observations on them. I will write on them and tell you how you did, what was great, and maybe what we could work on. Now I would like to talk about the Dorothy Mills reading. But first, I forgot to show you guys this last week. Turn to the very back of your reading guide. Turn to page 81. In the back of your reading guide, I have put maps for you, and we're going to refer to some of these maps throughout the year. Last week, I brought a big map that was the Roman Empire. Do you remember that? And basically, on page 81, you can see the Mediterranean Sea. Actually, I have my map that's not got anything on it. It's just a map. You know what, Zachary? Could you just take that end of it? Could you just hold it? Okay, but you can't hold it back so you can see. So once upon a time, did we find it? Yeah, they're looking it up in the corner there. Are you ready? Are you with us, gentlemen? Asher and Jaden. Once the whole Mediterranean really belonged to Rome, the whole Mediterranean. But as you can see in the map on page 81, here, we can just put that down. Thank you. I need to get a new system for holding that up here. By the year 500 AD, that's not true anymore. Look at all the shaded areas. We have all these groups of people that we read about last week. Visigoths, Burgundians, Franks, Sueves, Basques, Ostrogoths, Alemanni, Lombards, Vandals. Oh my goodness. And the West Empire, what today basically we call Europe and the north coast of Africa, have splintered apart, and they are now different kingdoms belonging to all these German chiefs. But everybody living there still thinks of themselves as Roman. Even the Germans, they came in and they learned Latin. By the time they took over, they were speaking Latin and they were Christians. So nobody really thought anything had changed in a major way. Does that make sense? There's still consuls, Roman consuls. There's still a Roman Senate. All these things still exist. But it's not really the same because the people in charge are from Germany. And although they liked the Roman system, they said the Romans have a good thing going here. Their courts, their system of laws, their infrastructure. Oh my goodness, the roads and the buildings, we like it. We like the baths. We like living as Romans. But we're not heirs to the empire. We came in from outside and split it up. But in the East, that didn't happen. And that's what you read about this week, right? We read about the Eastern half. This year, most of our time, we're going to talk about what's happening in the West. Not because the East isn't important. It is very important, but because most of our families probably come from Europe. And for those of us who don't, we live in a country that is based on what happened in Europe. We come out of the Western Empire. America comes out of that. So even if your family comes from a place that's not Europe, we're still kind of European because of our laws. The East still had an emperor. Do you remember? I think I told you guys this last week. Do you remember last week how long there was a Roman emperor on the throne? in the east? Anybody?
So, like, 130 something.
You're inching close. Do you remember what happened? Somebody did something within a generation of that. We mentioned a landmark of history that happened just 40 years.
Sophia. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Sophia.
Oh, that's something you read about. I'm thinking Columbus. Do you remember last week we talked about the fact that Columbus sailed 40 years after the Roman Empire fell? We always think, what? What? He discovered America 40 years after the Roman Empire fell? Yes. Yes. At the time, the capital, I don't have anywhere to clip it this year. So, okay. Okay. The capital was right here. You guys probably can't see this. Okay, I'm going to point to it. I'm going to point to this and then hold it up. The Black Sea. Do you see how there's water goes through here? You're going to have to trust me because it looks like it's closed off. Can you see it on your map? It definitely looks closed off. Water travels. This place is called the Hellespont. I don't have the time to tell you why it's called the Hellespont, so we'll skip over that. I really want to, though. And it's a wonderful place to put a town because of this. I can see through. Okay, so the Black Sea, the south and what would it be? Western coast of the Black Sea were great farmland. They grew bunches of wheat, barley, all sorts of grains, and then they would load it on ships and they would ship it through the Hellespont and it would hit the Mediterranean and they'd ship it all over the Mediterranean. Rome, when Rome was so full of people that, they had to ship food in because they couldn't feed everyone on the farms in Italy, they shipped food from there. Anybody who had a town here has ships full of food passing out all the time. And if you live on the place where the ships are passing out, if you are clever, you might just start charging tolls. You might charge all the ships to use your ports, to use your entrance, and they did. The Greeks had put a colony there called Byzantium, and they charged the boats going in and out. They made boatloads of money. It was great. And so when Constantine took over and he was the Roman Empire, he said, I'm going to found a new capital because Rome is associated with all those pagan gods so much, and I'm a Christian now, and I don't really want to have my capital there. Plus, that town's in a great place. It's already rich, and if we move it and make the capital there, it'll be even richer because we can charge all the ships going through. So he moved his capital there, and he renamed Byzantium to be Constantinople. And I think did we mention last week, what is Constantinople called today? Istanbul. Oh, because we know the song. I know. Some of us know the song. And I hope I get to go there someday. I'd really like to go to Istanbul because it's an amazing history amazing city with a long history. But back in 500, there was still an emperor on the throne, which takes me to question 1. I am on page 1 now. If you want to flip to page 1 to the questions. So this is your time. If there was a question that you couldn't find the answer to, we're going to talk about all of them today, so you can jot it down. Why is it not completely accurate to say that the Roman Empire fell in 476? Say it again. Because the Eastern Empire didn't fall. Only part of it fell. And guys, you got to remember something. Rome wasn't even the capital in the West anymore. The Romans had moved their capital to a town on the other side of Italy called Ravenna. Things were getting... Rome was a city that used to be really a hub of activity and full of life and wealth, but it had fallen on hard times. You know, the Goths had stolen a bunch of stuff in 410, and it wasn't such a nice city anymore. America has cities like that. I've never been there, but Detroit is a notoriously, Detroit, Michigan, used to be very wealthy because it was a hub of car manufacturing. And now a lot of things are manufactured overseas. And there are parts of Detroit that used to be very wealthy and busy, and now they're kind of falling into disrepair. That's Rome at this point. Does that make sense to you guys? So when people traveled to Constantinople, they just walked around with their jaw hanging open. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. It's so big. It's so lovely. Probably like Rome had been several hundred years before, but it wasn't so much anymore, unfortunately, because the Germans had sacked it. Yeah, Zachary.
Is that when Pope Benedict, when he came, there was like the same time period?
I don't know. I do. This could have been all through the Middle Ages. I think it was slightly later. Rome got so bad as the Middle Ages progressed that they would go to Rome and like cattle were grazing in the forum. Farm animals were just grazing in what was once the the forum. It's mind-boggling. So this beautiful city and this magnificent empire is hanging on hanging on. If you last for 1,000 years, you're not just hanging on. You're thriving through a lot of that. And the most famous emperor that came to the throne in the East was named Justinian. So I'm gonna take hands. What was Justinian's most important work? Yeah, Nathan.
The law he made, like the code.
Okay. Did anyone put a different answer for that? Because I agree, but there could be a different one. Oren, what did you put?
I said the code, the digest, the Pandemics, and the Institute.
Okay, well, that would all be the laws. Those are all codification collections of the laws. Did you put something else, Zachary? The Hagia Sophia. Okay, if you put either one of those, I would say you were right in a way. Dorothy Mills says that Roman law. Okay, first of all, why is Justinian writing new laws? What, did they not have old laws? Here's the problem. Rome had laws, but some of them are in this book, and some are in this book, and some are in this book. And sometimes they don't agree with each other. You know, this book says you can do something, and this one says you can't do it. I don't know what to do to that. So Justinian said, we need to collect all Roman law. I'm going to hire a crack team of legal minds, and you are going to organize this. And you are going to stop the contradictions between laws. And guys, that law code that Justinian had put together, it was the basis for all law up until like the 1800s. For centuries, if you went to law school in Europe, you studied Justinian's law code. That's one of the reasons we could say that might be his most important work. It lasted and lasted and was very influential. But he also built a magnificent church. Is there any reason I can't erase all of this? Are we all good? Okay. I won't take the time to do all of it, just enough so I have room to write. What are they saying? You know, I need you all to follow me around in life and just, I need a little chorus of cheerleaders. Okay. This church is called the Hagia Sophia or the Santa Sophia. They mean the same thing, holy wisdom. Hagios, I don't know if I can, Hagios, like that, means holy, all right, in Greek. And sanctus means holy in Latin. So it means the Church of Holy Wisdom, They call it both ways. And just to note, the people in the East, they're speaking Latin in court often, but more often they're speaking Greek. And they're writing in Greek, and they're naming things in Greek in the East. We're going to talk about this in a minute. The East and the West kind of started moving away from each other in various ways. This is one reason. When you don't write and speak the same language anymore, you move away from each other, don't you? And fewer people in Europe were able to read Greek as time went on. Yeah, Oren.
In the book, there's
Sancta, okay, Santa. This is a picture of it. I had a picture of the inside. You should Google a picture of the inside. Now, later on, Muslims took over, and the towers, the minarets, are Muslim minarets. Those are not Justinians.
Oh,
It's-
I thought you meant like Muslim terrorists.
Well, no, well, you know what? If you lived in Constantinople, you thought they were terrorists, but that's actually what we're going to read about next week.
Yes, let's go. I love sport. I don't like terrorists. But
I like that. Good save. Good save, Jaden.
I like to read about them.
So
So you can put attacks on them.
in the interior, there are lights, windows around the top, so the sunlight comes in. So there's a famous story. That much later, hundreds of years after this, some Russians were trying to decide if they wanted to align themselves. They were going to convert to Christianity. Do we want to align ourselves with Rome and the Western Catholic Church, or do we want to align ourselves with the Eastern Orthodox Church? And so they visited various church services, but when they went into this church, their jaws dropped, and they experienced the Eastern Orthodox liturgy, and they went back and they said, "We have found heaven on earth." That's what they said about church in that church. So we, and I just answered this next question, haven't I? I've just answered this next question. I do this all the time. What is the name of the magnificent Byzantine church built by Justinian in Constantinople? Sorry. I'm going to do it every week. I'm just telling you, even though sometimes I write in my book, don't say this. This is question. I ignore my own notes. In Ravenna, in Italy, we have a church with some mosaics. And I'm just gonna walk around. I know if I pass them around, it will just take up tons of our time, I know. And it will cause little conversations. But I will lay them out here, and you can always take a closer look, as you're leaving. But these are mosaics. Remember the little tiny colored pieces of stone put together to form a picture of Justinian and his entourage. This is actually Justinian, his army, his staff, and this is the bishop and the priests. And they're all so this is in a church. So the picture is sort of as if Justinian visited the church, and he's bringing the offering. He's got a bowl with the offering here. The bishop has a cross. He's carrying a Bible. His wife Theodora is outside the church. They're waiting. See that somebody's pulling a curtain back. They're waiting to invite her in, and she is with her entourage. So as I go around, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Theodora, the story of the romance of Justinian and Theodora. Theodora was an actress. Oh, the shock and the shame. Back in those days, being an actress was kind of like being a prostitute. Well, you know what? I am going to, you ask at home. We won't go into it. But somebody living a very immoral life. A woman living a very immoral life. Okay? Actresses lived that sort of life too. And so Theodora was one of them. What did you say? Oh. And, but Theodora found Jesus. Theodora is in the middle. She's the one with all of the fancy headdress. Oh no, someone is pulling back the curtain for her to enter. And she is there with her entourage.
Outside.
She's outside. He's inside. They're inside. And interestingly, Maximinus, the bishop, has his name over him. We happen to know who the bishop was because they
Halos, not like
okay. Actually, I am going to pursue that. So Oren's question is, why do they have halos if they're not what?
like the holy people like Mary or Jesus or something.
Well, okay, before I tell you why I think, would anyone like to address that? Is it, we just wrote a story about Saint Columba. You just gave me a picture, or a story about Saint Patrick. What does saint mean?
Saint means like did something great.
Okay. Okay. Santa, Sancta, Saint. Do we see any similarity there in those words? It means holy. It means holy. And you know what? Paul in the Bible tells us we're a holy priesthood. We're holy. We're holy. You get the halo if you're holy. And if we're followers of Jesus, we're holy. You're a temple of the Holy Spirit. I feel like if we kind of pictured, okay, if I pictured that there was a halo over my head all the time, it might change some of the things I say and do and think. Because I would want to be worthy of it, But there is. Does that make sense, Oren? Is that an acceptable answer to you? That Justinian and Theodora are Christians. Therefore, and only God can judge their hearts, I realize, but they profess Christianity. They're holy. However, I have another answer for you too. People who did things like built an amazing church for God, helped spread the gospel. That was Justinian and Theodora. This is another reason that they give them the halo. It was an excellent observation. And when we look at pictures and we read things, we should think like that. Why? Why would they do this? Okay, I'm back to Theodora, the story of Theodora. Theodora was an actress, not living the best life, but she heard the gospel and decided to leave behind her old life and become a Christian. Unfortunately, the group of Christians that she met were heretics, so she became a heretic, but just kind of a slight heretic. But Justinian was traveling. She was living at this time, in the Middle East, where Israel and Lebanon she was living there with a friend. And Justinian came. This friend of Theodora's actually